Let's talk about setting up a document for the stamp book project. And again, I'm not specifying the size of the page for you in the assignment. And I mean, it's entirely up to you how you'd like to work with this. In this example, I'm just going to set up a familiar to us already, an 8 by 8 inch page. And again, the key here is that we're working on the 2-page spread. Um, and I mean, that's something to do that in InDesign. We'll have to create a 3-page document um, and make sure that we enable facing pages. So I'm going to make sure my page size is set to 8 by 8, and I'll name my project right away, stamp book or stamp souvenir sheet, whichever you'd like to. Um, I'm going to make sure there are 3 pages. I'm going to set them to facing. Columns is 1 for now, that's fine. We're going to talk a little bit about how to set up guides and margin. We want to set our margins. Yeah, 1/2 inch is fine. Um, it depends on how much text you're planning on placing onto the information page. It's entirely up to you. And then I'm going to set a bleed, right? The bleed is already familiar to us. That's something for oversetting the visuals to prevent any printing mishaps. So I'm going to click create, and there's my document. So um, I set up, if I look at my pages, these are my two-page spread, and this is where I'm going to focus my attention on these two. Oh, let me close my Pathfinder tool. So how do we start here? I mean, again, essentially, it's entirely up to you how you're going to proceed here in terms of if you want to work on a grid, if you want to work, if you don't want to work on a grid. And again, just to show you, InDesign doesn't have an option for you to create flexible grids, right? Where you could just create your own, grab the guide inside of the either of the vertical or the horizontal ruler, right? And we've looked at it before. And if I drag one and I grab one, I can grab my manual ruler and just drop it anywhere in the document. The same goes with the y-axis, right? So I can create, I mean, essentially this becomes a free form, right? Exercise, and we're playing with a little bit looser stipulations here, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't set a grid for yourself if you'd like to. If you'd like to set a rhythm, if you want to control the flow of the both of the pages, right? Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly, so I have a box here I'm going to create. I'm going to delete these guides, right? You can select these guides, and if you don't want them, you can just simply delete them. If you have many guides and you don't want to go manually grabbing and deleting them, you can always go to View, Grids and Guides, and then just make sure that you delete all the guides on the spread, and that will clear them up, right? Um, so we'll talk about my workflow, my strategy. Let me make the window a little bit bigger so we can see it, so we can have a little bit more real estate here. Um, so what I want to do here is really just sort of talk about, as I said, my workflow. So let's say I'm working on a stamp project, and what I want is I'm going to place my stamps. This is going to be my stamp sheet, and this is going to be my information sheet. So all of the information about the designer of my choosing is going to go onto this page, and my stamps are going to go here. And I'm just loosely, I mean, I made a couple of sketches thinking about how I'd like to go about this. And what I'll do is I'm just going to grab this, create a guide, and I'm going to drop it right in between, in the center of this page, which is around 4 inches, right? Um, and you notice I have a little measurement right there in my in the little window, floating window there, or floating marker, I should say. I'm going to grab another one and sort of center on the page, right, as well. 4. So 4 and 4. So this is my physical and optical center of this page. And right now, this is all that I want to do. I just want to rough in my stamps. I'm going to grab sort of a frames just for the placeholder. I'm going to grab this frame and I'm holding shift. I'm going to create that 2 by 2 inch square that I'm talking about. And if you are not getting an exact 2 by 2 inch square, just go to properties and make sure that you enable lock your proportional changes, and just click 2 in here, and it should default to 2 inches as well, and click enter, right? So any box that you create, you can manually really just turn it into 2. And then as long as this is clicked, it should proportionally, if it's not a square to start with, it's going to proportionally lock any changes that are down to one side. It's going to increase the other side by that much. So make sure then if you want to manually uh, manipulate it, just make sure you unlock the proportional lock and click 2. and then and there you go. So I have 2 by 2 inch square, right? And again, this is for me just a placeholder. I'm going to place one right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now use the guides again to actually rough in that 2 by 2 inch. Um, and then I'm just going to grab the box, slide it down, and there we go. So now I can actually technically take these pages and delete them. And here's my setup for my stamp sheet, right? For my stamp book. That is if I want my stamps to exist directly in the center or center align to the page itself, right? If you want something asymmetrical, right? Or if you want to play with the stamp location on the page, or if you want to spread your stamps throughout the page, that's entirely up to you. Make sure, you're going to set separate guides, right? So what I mean by that is, for example, let's say if I don't want my stamps to be in the center, right? I can grab my, let's say I want my stamps to be slightly off to the side. So I'm going to move this to 3. I'm going to grab this guide up, and grab this guide, slide it down, right? And I'm going to actually, I want to have my stamps offset slightly to the edge here. The same thing, I'm just going to create my guides. And I'm just going to use one of these boxes to rough in my other 2 guides. And there you have it. Right, so there's my grid offset. That way this frees up some space for me to work with some visuals or add additional information and so on and so forth, and my stamps to be to the side. So that's just the basic grid, right? So if I know that I have my stamp perforation prepared, right, in a separate guide, in a separate tutorial, I show you how to do this. I decided to work with a rectangular stamp, not a square one. Again, it's entirely your own choice, your own decision how you want your stamp to look. I'm just going to temporarily fill this just so I can visually. I'm just going to change its opacity so it's not as obtrusive visually. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to control click on this or right click, whichever you want, and then click copy, and then I'm going to bring it in here and right click and paste. And here's my stamp. And now I can start placing that stamp whatever I'd like to write. So there you go. So 1, 2, and then 3, and 4. And there you go. So that's my stamp sheet. I started working with my stamp sheet and laying it out. Once again, just to remind you that this positioning is not a recommendation. That's just my workflow, my decision. These are going to be, this is how I'd like for my stamps and my stamp sheet to look. Your stamp might be of a different shape. They might be positioned differently on the page. And this is your layout. This is your real estate. This is all your own individual decisions.